I wrote something that I want to read. It has to do with whether or not a woman can preach, and of course, whether or not a woman should preach. Are those things linked together? Is it merely that a woman should not preach, but that she could preach, she's just not allowed? Or do these things actually coincide, ability and allowance? So I've written the following. Complementarianism and antinomianism have this in common. They both subtly assert that God's loving commands, duties, and roles are at least partially arbitrary by severing the relationship between what God assigns from how God designs. They malign the character of God, albeit perhaps unintentionally, as capricious. A woman should not preach because she cannot preach. The fact that many complementarians believe a woman is able but merely not allowed reveals a profound misunderstanding within even conservative churches regarding the nature of men and women and the nature of preaching. Women nurture and give life. Many, even in the Reformed camp, assume preaching is nothing more than providing spiritual nourishment, serving a spiritual meal on the Lord's day. If so, why can't women do it? This confusion is compounded by the failures of many male preachers. Many male pastors today sit on a stool next to a high-top table with a warm cup of coffee, flower arrangements, and a few Bible verses pulled up on their iPad. They share instead of heralding. They feel instead of knowing. They think instead of believing. But 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 11 says this, "Whoever speaks should do so as one who speaks the very oracles of God." Preaching is not a place, therefore, to share our thoughts and feelings. It is a place to herald universal truths which would remain true had the preacher never been born. Yes, preaching is never less than the act of providing spiritual nourishment for God's hungry people. But oh, how it is so much more. Certainly, in part, preaching can be likened to a mother serving up dinner in the kitchen to her hungry children. But preaching must also be likened to William Wallace riding with his sword down the front line, rallying the troops for war. A woman should not do this because indeed she cannot. For the record, podcasting is not preaching. I know because I do both, albeit imperfectly. Therefore, I have no intention of combating faithful sisters in Christ who utilize their podcast platforms well, so long as they are not neglecting their chief role in their homes. And because I am not omniscient, I will assume that these faithful Christian women are prioritizing precisely what God has called them to. So, for any of you wondering, there's my little piece on the issue of women not being allowed to preach and the issue of women not being able to preach. Thanks.